Alright, it's set back on the hinge. So let's wedge it over. Make sure I got there it goes. Get out of here. Well, that's never good, right? You throw a chain, it always puts a little burr on the little guide plate down there. So I got to sit down and find it and file it so it'll go through that guide bar again. And the reason why you want to take the time to do that is that chain's pretty hard. Why waste a perfectly good bar on one stupid chain, you know? And what happened was just doing normal stuff and it kind of tossed. So the Husky 572 with a goofy chain saved the day on this one. And yet again, I'm working on this one. Well, now the work begins. And I had to do a lot of filing on that chain because the burrs were pretty bad when it got tossed. And I eventually just gave up and used a hand grinder. But I figure I'm going to try to use that chain, just get through the whole job, and it'll actually be pretty good. These are dirty logs, so I'm going to do as much as I can. Then I have to go up and get a PV. But let me just start with this. That one's too small, it's basswood. But interesting enough, the next log over is ash. He'll take that, even though it's small, because he can use it for a crane mat, I guess.
Well, I ran it out of gas and now it won't start. I mean, it won't start. I look at the plug. The mixer is perfect. Look at that nice tan, brown. It is dry as a bone. So I'm going to bet you money that we're having problems with the pulse line. Something's not right here. And that might be the issue with the whole saw not restarting, as the pulse line melted off. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm going to give it one more shot, put a little gas down the carburetor again. If I can get to fire, I'll finish off, but then we're going to rip into this thing. But I'm going to bet you anything that's what we're going to find is either the pulse line pulled off the nipple. If that's the case, it'll just fire for a second then quit, or something along those lines. Or just I got to go back to the stock carburetor, although it had the same issues with that thing too. It ran better when I put the 372 carburetor on it, but saw is definitely a dilemma. Yeah, I got it started by dumping gas down the carburetor. That plug was so dry, and the choke is actually closed. It's just having trouble drawing fuel for some reason. A little interesting point or detail. That's a lot of dirty wood, right? A lot of mud. You know, dozers skidded up through the swamp basically. And I bucked all of it. And that up there. I did it with the Dolmar, although I had one little hiccup where I ran out of gas and couldn't get it started until I put a little bit of gas in the spark plug hole and it lit right off. But I did it with this bar and chain, and this is C83. I have not touched that chain since I put it on, I don't know, day before yesterday maybe. And it's got at least 3 saw tanks of gas. Of course, that's not saying much of the Dolmar, but I'm going to guess somewhere around 7 trees plus a bunch of clearing and all this dirty wood bucking, right? Now I'm careful, but I guess just to make a point, let's see how sharp it is. There's some wood right here that's not going to go anywhere. We'll put that C83 in that wood and see whether or not it can still cut anything, right? You'd figure by now it's pretty whooped. Pretty much this whole stick right here is just basswood. And this would replicate what those guys out west have with pine.
Makes everybody look like a hero. So we'll cut a little bit there, and then I have a chunk of maple. We'll hit that. Hard maple right there. Point is, I can still work with that chain just the way it is. And like I said, I got through all that dirty wood. All of it. Plus a bunch of trees. And a couple of tanks of gas. So I'm going to continue to run it. Starting into the next load. Just kind of curious. Because it actually does keep its edge pretty well. Not like RS, there's no doubt, but it's not bad. You can't argue with what you're looking at right here.